Are Japanese pressings of vinyl records superior to other recordings? In this video, I am A/B testing 10 Japanese pressings of killer albums to attempt to answer that question, so don't go anywhere. Hey, what's up? I'm Jason, and in this video, I'm gonna share my honest opinion about how some of my favorite Japanese vinyl pressings sound, so you know exactly what to expect when dropping the needle on some Japanese vinyl. All of the pressings that I review today are linked in the description below. Let's jump right in. So Japanese vinyl has a very good reputation. And if you've ever done a search for Japanese vinyl, you've likely come across some very common opinions. Number one, Japanese pressings use superior, quiet, virgin vinyl. Number two, Japanese pressing plants conduct superior quality control measures. And number three, many Japanese pressings include beautiful packaging, including obi strips, lyric sheets, photos, and liner notes. The one big disadvantage that you'll likely come across is that some people feel like some Japanese pressings leave something to be desired on the mastering side, leaving them sounding excessively thin or bright. I carefully and analytically listened to these 10 albums, A/B testing them against digital streaming files of the same album, and also show off some of the fun stuff like obi strips and inserts and lyric sheets and stuff like that. But the real purpose of this video is to attempt to answer one critical question. How do Japanese pressings stack up sonically? I'm listening to all this music through an early 1970s Marantz 2230 and a pair of Magnapan MG1 speakers. The vinyl is played on an early 80s Victor QLY7 with a new Audio-Technica Shibata stylus. All right, so full disclosure, I am conducting this experiment against digital files coming off Spotify at 24-bit, 96 kilohertz. You've heard me talk about Meon Records in the past, and Meon is my go-to when it comes to buying vinyl online. They have a massive selection of well over 100,000 records in their inventory, covering all genres of music. And they usually offer several different pressings and condition options for the same record, so there's something for everybody. They ship worldwide and have multiple locations including Japan and Germany. They just opened a warehouse in the UK, and they are coming to the US in 2024, which I am stoked for. I have a special limited promo code just for the holidays that I want to pass on to you. This is limited to 20 uses and is only good through December 31st, 2023. Enter spinzchristmas at checkout and you will save 16% on your entire vinyl records purchase. All of the records I'm reviewing today were purchased from Meon. I cannot recommend them highly enough. All the links are in the description, so go check out Meon Records and grab some vinyl for 16% off. All right, so let's kick this list off right. We got Led Zeppelin 1, Led Zeppelin's debut album here. Led Zeppelin 1 was released on the Atlantic label in 1969. This is the 1976 pressing. It doesn't have a series name, but this is from a series of Led Zeppelin albums that have very similar obi strips here. Here is Led Zeppelin 3 with the LZ3 obi strip. So how does this album stack up? Right out of the gate, the difference between this album and the digital stream on Spotify is pretty apparent. The streamed version, which is the new remaster, is just brighter. And when I say brighter, I mean in a good way. This album has a little bit of muddiness on the top end. Right from the get-go, you hear Jimmy Page's guitar on the tune Good Times, Bad Times, and it's just not as prominent or bright as it is on the digital source, which I mean, I really like. I think that what they did on the remaster, at least from what I'm hearing on Spotify, and at least on the guitars, is very nice. I think it makes the guitars pop a little bit more than on here. When I first listened to this, I was sort of already thinking that. I mean, it wasn't as if I heard the stream first and then heard this one second. In all cases, I listened to the album, the vinyl record first, and then the stream. And so, like I said, I mean, everything else on this album sounds very similar to the digital file. It's really just the guitars for the most part, and it might be the slightest bit punchier. So, I mean, whatever they did with the remix, in my humble opinion, actually sounds better, but this is still a fantastic pressing. All right, one of the greatest hard bop albums of all time. This is Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers on Blue Note. This album is popularly known as MION. All right, this album was originally pressed in January of 1959, and this is a 1984 Japanese reissue. And this pressing sounds incredible. It has a wide, deep soundstage, smooth and refined in the top end. The bass and the kick drum on this album are full and punchy. There's a ton of airiness on this album. It's just very open and not compressed. All of the little ambient details are there, like, you know, the breathing, and you can hear the finger gesturing and the drumsticks. It's just all that little acoustic ambience that kind of adds to usually a jazz mix. And it just makes for a more authentic sounding experience. And I think it's really cool. You feel like you are front row, center stage for this album. It's really unbelievable. I would say that this album sounds even better than the digital mix that I listened to. I mean, this is a killer pressing. There is your Blue Note label that everyone is so familiar with. And this came with kind of a catalog of some other albums here on the back. Got a data memorandum there. And then it opens up to some really copious liner notes, which I have not attempted to translate yet, but I definitely want to check these out. All right, this is one of my favorite albums of all time. This is Eric Dolphy's Out to Lunch, originally released in 1964. This is the 1977 pressing. And I mean, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but I kind of have to because this album sounds so good. We get a very nice wide soundstage here. The top end, again, is very smooth, no distortion. The kick drum, bass, and bass clarinet are all just round and punchy and clean. There's just a massive dynamic range on this album. There's a lot of quiet parts, there's a lot of louder parts, and they just all fit in really nicely. The frequency range is extremely broad too, because even just with Eric's playing, he's playing flute, sax, and bass clarinet on this album. So you get a wide range just right there. And there's just no distortion. Everything just sounds clean and clear and beautiful. Another place where sometimes you get some distortion could be on vibes, especially as they kind of echo and ring out. And you get none of that on Bobby Hutcherson's vibes here. They are very clean. And Freddie Hubbard plays on this record. He plays some killer trumpet on here, and it's all very clean. And the mix is very separate. Everybody stands out. There's no frequencies tripping over each other. It's very well done. There's a lot going on this album. There's a lot of unconventional playing here. And so the fact that it was mic'd and mixed so well is very impressive. There's no weird or distracting artifacts coming through the mix. Man, this album sounds good. Not a whole lot of extras to show you here on my copy, but there's the label, and then there's one insert, which I don't read Japanese, but I've used a translator, the Google Translate app from my phone, and I've tried to read some of it. It's actually really good. I want to figure out a way to get this translated because there's actually some really good notes on this album. All right, next up, another big heavy hitter. Here we have The Doors' debut album, released in January 1967. This is a 1973 pressing, released on the Elektra label. This one has a very cool obi strip here. Love those colors. I just think that matches the album so well. All right, so this album can tend to sound a little muddy, and I think just in general, like all the mixes I've heard of this, including the digital mix and notes that I've seen on the internet and stuff like that, the first album or two, or maybe even three, just aren't as high fidelity as some of the later albums. But having said that, obviously this is a killer album, 10 out of 10. And I mean, if the original mix leaves a little something to be desired, I mean, this basically sounds exactly how we remember it. I mean, letting this pressing duke it out with the digital file, actually, this pressing holds up very well. The only difference might be, and when you're A/B testing against a digital file, sometimes it's difficult. It's apples and oranges in a lot of ways, right? And so, you know, the digital mix can tend to seem a little brighter to me. And I don't know if that's because my stylus is just warmer. Maybe my turntable is just warmer. you know, whatever it is. But having said that, I mean, the mix itself is fantastic. A lot of these nuances are things that you're really only gonna pick up when you're listening to them in close succession to each other, when you're listening for it very intentionally. But then again, sometimes on the digital files or just on newer mixes, they can have been remastered. And so sometimes they will be a little brighter. Sometimes you'll notice a little more separation. That doesn't always mean better, right? I mean, there's a reason why I listen to my music on vinyl as opposed to digital files, is because I love a lot of the acoustic ambience that comes along with vinyl. And so you don't get that when you're listening to a digital file. But with very small exceptions, this is very close to the digital file as far as the mix goes, but I actually prefer this pressing more. All right, this is Jazz Portraits, or Mingus in Wonderland. Charles Mingus, originally released in 1959 on the United Artists label. This is probably top 3 Mingus albums for me. I love this album. It is so good. This is a 1976 pressing. So the one thing I'll say about this recording in general is that the piano is not mic'd very well, in my opinion. I mean, I was just listening to this, and when the piano comes in about halfway through track 1, I was like, wait a second, let me go listen to the digital file. And I did, and it's the same exact thing. So I just don't think it was mic'd well. And I mean, it's not a huge problem, but it is something that I picked up on. Listen, I'm listening to these things extremely critically, right? So this is a fantastic album no matter how you slice it. But that was the one thing that I was I kind of wish that the piano was maybe just a little, you know, I don't know, mixed a little better or mic'd a little better, you know, whatever it is that's causing the piano to just not feel, you know, as present or as clear or just vibrant as it could sound. I mean, and again, that's going to be present in all the mixes. I feel like, unless they fixed it somewhere, or unless it just sounds better on the original. Anyway, this is an amazing pressing. Sounds very close to the digital mix. You know, I wouldn't, all things being equal, I would absolutely prefer this album over the digital mix. It's that good. United Artists label, and again we get kind of a catalog of available albums there, and then we do have some liner notes. All right, next up, the magnificent Thad Jones. This is an incredible album. This is also a very difficult album to snag. This album was originally issued in 1957. This is a 1979 mono reissue, and this album, it just sounds killer. I mean, but the one thing I would say is that it's mixed a little bit hot for me. I had to, like, you know, tweak the EQ a little bit, maybe turn the volume down just a bit so that it wasn't too fatiguing. Again, this is 1957, so I mean, that could be just inherent in the mix, but I mean, still doesn't take anything away from just how killer this album is, and also one of the great jazz album covers, in my opinion. That's so cool. I should back up a little bit. I mean, when it comes to jazz, sometimes trumpet can be a little fatiguing, at least for me. It's not going to be that way for everyone. I mean, all of our ears are different, but sometimes, you know, a high-pitched trumpet is going to kind of get in my ear a little bit, and I'm going to have to, like, you know, make a little adjustments so that I can listen to it comfortably. And that might be the only thing that's really going on here. Because otherwise, this is a very well mixed album, and I think it does just fine against the digital file, you know, if not better. This one did come with some liner notes on the insert, as well as another catalog of albums there. All right, here's a banger. This is Velvet Underground and Nico. This album was originally released in 1967. This is a 1973 pressing on the Verve label. This one doesn't have any inserts, but it does have the peelable banana on here. And I've not listened to this album in quite some time. I picked this up a few months ago and just haven't had a chance to listen to the album in its entirety, but this obviously is a kick-ass album. I mean, this album kicks off with Sunday Morning, and to be honest, I was hanging with it. So Sunday Morning, I was hanging. It's so good. It's so good. And then I'm Waiting for My Man comes on, and I'm locked in. It's a killer track. And then track 3, Femme Fatale, starts. And of course you have Nico singing vocals on that album. And I had to take a step back. I was like, whoa, what is happening here? Her vocals in harmony with whatever else is going on in the background. It's probably a guitar. It sounds kind of like a harp. I don't know if it's being played like a harp or what's going on there, but it just was not sounding good. And so again, this is one where I jumped to the digital file on Spotify, and it's the exact same thing. So I can't believe I didn't remember it sounding like that. And it's not all the way through the song, but definitely the first few bars are kind of like, whoa, it's sonically, there's a lot of sort of distortion and just kind of muddiness going on. I also get that that's kind of the point with this album. That's kind of the way it was recorded and mixed. It's kind of a precursor to punk in that way, or post-punk in the sense that, you know, there's distortion and stuff like that. But anyway, other than that, and obviously that's not even a problem because it's the same thing on every mix as far as I know. And so this album stacks up against the digital file extremely well. This is a very, very nice pressing. I know there are pressings of this album that do not sound good. And so I can definitely recommend this over some of those other pressings that I've had in the past. This one didn't come with any inserts, but just a fantastic album. I mean, if you know this album and if you love this album and if you're looking for a vinyl pressing, I would say feel confident going with this one. Yeah, it holds up very, very well. All right, this is one of my favorite jazz sleeper albums. This is Heavy Sounds by Elvin Jones, released on Impulse back in 1968. This album is from 1979, part of the Modern Jazz Selection 1500 series on Impulse. This is a killer album. And again, the only thing I would say that separates this from the digital mix is that the digital mix just sounds a little bit punchier. Very similar to how you would hear an original versus like a club mix or something. And I happen to have like the Grateful Dead's Live Dead. I have the original and the club mix, and they're both very, very good. But if I A/B test them, the original would just sound a little bit punchier. And that's kind of what we have here. And so whatever the cause of that is, you know, this did come out 10 years after the original release. So, I mean, that could have something to do with it. But the fact that the digital file is punchier too, I don't know. It's either been remastered or maybe they use the original tape. I'm not sure. But I mean, again, I'm only noticing that by A/B testing it. So this is really an incredible album. Very nice soundstage, very nice acoustic ambience, very nice frequency response on this. Again, there are some very fun things going on with this album, but it's all recorded very well, mixed very well, and reproduced very well on this pressing. You get the MCA label on this one, and then some liner notes. What is cool about this one is that you have English liner notes on this side. So the other side is just kind of a track listing, probably just details about each of the tracks, and then this is more of an article. So haven't actually read that yet. I need to read that. All right, I'm saving one of the best for last, but this is the penultimate album on our list. This is Sunny Side Up, Dizzy Gillespie, Sonny Rollins, and Sonny Stitt. Just a phenomenal, underrated album. And this album sounds very, very good, but the digital mix is just better. You know, if I listen to this album, it sounds terrific. But when I listened to the digital mix afterward, it was just like everything had just been improved a little bit. And God, again, by improved, what do I mean? I mean, a little more separation, a little bit more sort of, a little brighter, a little punchier. And again, I sound like a broken record. I mean, there's other factors involved here, which is, you know, that's kind of what you run when you're going to do something like this, trying to compare vinyl to digital files. You know, there's just so many factors involved. This is a killer album. I would never say, you know, steer away from this. This is a 1985 mono pressing on the Verve label. Label there. Another catalog. More liner notes. All right, last and certainly not least, John Coltrane's A Love Supreme, released on Impulse in 1965. This pressing is from 1980, and wow, what a fantastic sounding record this is. I would put this right up there with MION and Out to Lunch that I reviewed earlier. I just think they're 10 out of 10. I mean, this is another one that is just so good. First and foremost, Coltrane sax comes through just powerful and clean. And this is a stereo mix, and I like the stereo mix. I know some people maybe would rather hear the mono mix, and I've heard the mono mix. I think it's very good as well, but I think the stereo mix is mixed very well. And again, we have a wide, deep soundstage on here, smooth top end, not fatiguing, bass and kick drum, full and punchy. It's just a really good mix. I know this was recently re-released as a UHQR. I don't have the UHQR. I've never heard the UHQR. You know, maybe that one sounds better than this, but I mean, this is a very good sounding record, especially for the price. I mean, I think this album keeps up very well with the digital mix. In fact, I just think it's better. I mean, I would much rather listen to this than the digital mix. It's just a very impressive pressing, all things considered, you know? Again, we have MCA labels here and some liner notes. Haven't tried to translate these yet, so I have no idea what that says. All right, so did we reach any conclusions here? Well, as usual, the frustratingly honest answer is it depends. And it always depends. I mean, it depends whether you're listening to a US pressing, a UK pressing, a Canadian pressing, Japanese pressings, whatever. I mean, it's always going to depend pressing to pressing. And we have to judge these things on a case-by-case basis. But, and I just want to say, I am being extremely critical here, right? And I'm comparing to a digital source. And so by and large, these pressings sound fantastic. If you have the funds to buy originals and just build a whole original collection, especially with some of these older jazz albums, I say go for it. You know, of course, that opens up a whole nother can of worms with, you know, quality and wear and tear and stuff like that. I think a lot of people are happy with audiophile reissues, and I'm not claiming that these are audiophile reissues, but some of them are very good. And in most cases, these are very affordable options. Some of these albums are very hard to find in other editions, and so having the option to purchase a very nice Japanese pressing is pretty cool. I should also mention that all of these records are extremely quiet. The noise floor is very low. The surface noise is very low. Also, having bought all of these from Meon, oftentimes I'm buying VG Plus. And I have to be honest, most of these albums sound near mint. I mean, these are very clean albums. And I also want to mention that none of the albums sound particularly bright. I mean, the Thad Jones is one that it's loud more than anything, and again, the trumpet for me is a little bit fatiguing, but I don't know, that would be the one that maybe people would argue is bright, but I really don't think that any of the other ones are. And I think all of the albums have the bass response that you would expect from these recordings. And I'm not saying that Japanese records are never bright. Trust me, I did a review of the Beatles' Revolver, which you can see if you click right here. And I compared 3 different pressings, and they're definitely bright. They are fatiguing to listen to. So if Japanese vinyl isn't consistently better than other vinyl, then why even bother? I have come to love Japanese vinyl. I will probably always collect Japanese vinyl. I'm not gonna sit here and say that Japanese vinyl is a silver bullet by any means, but I wouldn't make that claim about US vinyl, UK vinyl, or any vinyl. But oftentimes Japanese vinyl can be a very good choice. For the most part, what I noticed from the albums on this list were they're quiet, low surface noise, with all of the qualities that you would want in terms of imaging, frequency response, and distortion. And I'm not gonna say Japanese pressings are never distorted. I have a Miles Davis Japanese pressing that is very distorted on Miles's horn. So Again, it's never going to be 100% for anything, but I still believe that Japanese vinyl can be a very good option for most people. I would love to know what you think. Do you have a Japanese vinyl collection? What are your thoughts about how they sound as compared to other pressings in your collection or other streaming services or CDs or whatever? If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel more than you know. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.